Is your goal to get pronunciation so good you get reactions like this?
タイガーさん、日本人じゃないんです。
そうですね。日本人じゃないですね。
騙された。
アメリカ人なんですけど。
騙された。
Or is your goal to just not get Nihongo Jozu'd in the first 5 seconds of conversation? Konnichiwa, watashi wa America jin desu. Oh, Nihongo Jozu. Then you're in the right place, because it's my job to ensure that by the end of this video, you'll learn everything I know about pronunciation from my last 10 years of learning languages. I'll be mainly using the languages I'm familiar with for examples in this video, but what I teach you today will apply to any languages you're trying to learn. So without further ado, let's get into it. Woo-choo! Alright, so in my previous video, I covered pronunciation as one of the last steps in my guide. However, I would say that it doesn't actually have a specific place because pronunciation is something that I'm thinking about throughout the whole process. For example, the first step that I covered in my guide was the writing system. I think this is a great opportunity to learn the basics of reading and writing in your target language, and from a pronunciation standpoint, it's a really great place to get started because you can study the individual sounds of the language and break them down one by one. To show you what I mean, let's take a trip to somewhere you're probably familiar with. Ah, this place brings back memories. Though I didn't bring you here just to get a cheap meal, even though this place is like low-key expensive now, but that's besides the point. I brought you here because if you were to come to this place in Japan, it would be called Mcdonalds. And maybe if you wanted to get some food, you would order a double cheeseburger. And you might be asking yourself, why are these words pronounced with so many extra syllables? Well, if you keep pronunciation in mind during the initial phase of learning the writing system, things might start to make more sense. Because in Japanese, you would see that every consonant needs to be paired with a vowel. The only exception to this being the N sound, because it's kind of weird and none of the vowels want to be its friend.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
For example, there's no k character in Japanese, because it must be paired with a vowel like ka, ki, ku, ke, ko. So that's why you see this pattern of consonant, vowel in most of the words in Japanese. So if you're keeping pronunciation in mind while also learning the writing system, it can help you understand how you should be pronouncing certain words, like why you should pronounce this as kamera, and not something like kamna, which is a bit closer to English. But so my point is that if you want to improve your pronunciation as a beginner, you should pay close attention to the fundamentals of the writing system because a lot of important pronunciation information will be learned during that step. And also during this first step is when I'd be going through the pronunciation of each sound in the language and pay special attention to any pronunciations that I noticed were particularly challenging. For example, in Korean, a lot of people struggle with the difference between a and o and o. Or in Japanese, people might struggle a lot with the R sound since it's different, like if you say the word radio in English versus radio in Japanese, or the word orange in English versus orenji. So now might be a good time to take a look at any specific pronunciations you have a hard time with and practice them a lot. So what I would try to do at this step is try to look up some guides online and see if I can find something that works for me. When you're looking up videos about pronunciation, I really recommend trying to find some that will show you the diagram of the mouth, since that will help you understand a lot better on how exactly you're supposed to pronounce things. For example, here's a video explaining the Japanese R versus the English R and or L sounds. And so I really recommend trying to find videos like this if you can. And after researching techniques for pronunciation, I would just try practicing saying them over and over again on my own. And I'd even record myself and listen to my pronunciation and then play a clip of a native pronouncing it and try to pay close attention to where my pronunciation seemed lacking. Sometimes it can be hard to know if you're pronouncing it correctly if your ears aren't used to those specific sounds, but I'll be going over a tip later to help you know whether or not your pronunciation is right, even if you can't tell the difference yourself. This tip will be especially helpful for those of you learning Chinese and need help with the tones. And I just want to stress, don't worry if you can't get the perfect pronunciation at first. Learning pronunciation is a long process, and it's something you can revisit and work on over time. Like for example, I'm still trying to learn how to roll my R's in Spanish. Like really, is it like pero? Or is it pero? Anyway, once you identify any specific sounds that you might be having difficulty with, I'd move on to trying to pronounce full sentences. The way I do this is that while reviewing my flashcards, I'll practice saying everything aloud and try using the words that I'm learning in full phrases. And if you're having a hard time making flashcards or just don't know where to start, I would highly recommend taking a look at today's sponsor, Fluent U. I found Fluent U to be a great tool for sentence mining because while watching videos on YouTube or Netflix, I can just click on the interactive subtitles, and just from clicking that one word in the subtitle, I can see examples of that word used in other videos and contexts as well. If there's a word I don't know in an example sentence, I can click that one as well and keep going down the rabbit hole. And with the Fluent U Chrome extension, I can do this for any YouTube or Netflix video that has subtitles. There's also a comprehensive review feature that'll test you on words that you've learned, as well as a mobile app. If you want a great source of reliable and high-quality examples for flashcards, it would be hard to beat Fluent U. Fluent U is providing a free trial, so you can try the service risk-free, and if you do enjoy the service, they're also providing a big discount just for my viewers. See the description of this video for more details. But yeah, once I have my flashcards ready to review, while I'm reviewing them, I try to pronounce them aloud as well. If I'm not 100% sure about how it's pronounced, I'll highlight the word and put it into Google Translate. And as you're listening to Google Translate, you can try saying what you hear. And I already know that some people might be like, there's no way you could learn pronunciation from Google Translate, you'll end up sounding like a robot. But the thing I'd like to point out is that in the beginning stages of learning a new language, our goal shouldn't be to have completely flawless and perfect pronunciation from the get-go. Because in my opinion, if you get too bogged down in worrying about having perfect pronunciation, you'll end up starting to overthink everything you say. And this might make it harder to start speaking, which is the main goal of my method, and I think that it really contributes a lot to rapidly increasing the rate at which you can improve in a language. So our goal in this step is just to identify where we're having difficulties and try to work on them over time. I'm not going to try to be some kind of clickbaity YouTuber promising you results in 3.5 nanoseconds, but what I am promising you is that good pronunciation will come with a lot of time, practice, and exposure to the language as you learn. But what using Google Translate will do is help us improve the chances that natives will understand what we're saying and not be like, "Hi, could I get a croissant and a pain au chocolat?" For example, right now I'm trying to learn the word toroku, which happens to mean subscribe in Japanese. This was definitely a completely random example. So for example, if I'm not sure how to pronounce the word, I go ahead and put it into Google Translate and give it a listen. Toroku. 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 Yeah, for example here, it sounds like the O part in toroku is actually elongated. So actually in this example, I might go ahead and put the word into my dictionary app just to double check. And yeah, would you look at that? There's actually an extra U there, which I actually genuinely didn't know until just now. Okay, so now that we know how to pronounce the word, we can actually even practice our pronunciation by trying to get Google to recognize what we're saying back. Toroku. Alright, awesome. It looks like you got it on the first try, but if you just want to be double sure, you can also try using the word in a sentence. もしこの動画を楽しんでいただけたら、ぜひ登録してください. And would you look at that? It understood everything I was saying.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe.
But yeah, I think this can be a helpful method when you're first starting to learn a language and are in need of free and easy ways to get instant feedback on your pronunciation. And again, I'm not at all saying like, oh, this one weird trick will have you have 100% native pronunciation or something like that. But I think this method can help a lot of people and is useful to have in your metaphorical tool belt when learning pronunciation. Here's another example showing you how this method can show you whether or not you're pronouncing things correctly or not. Okay, so in this example, it's basically a game show where they're trying to get the phone to recognize their pronunciation. And the word they're trying to pronounce in English is rhythm. And we can take a look at how they do.
2問目はこちらのリズム。
リズム。リズム。
レゴマン。
Lego Man is crazy. Yeah, so the reason why they're pronouncing it like this is because Japanese has a lot of loan words with English, and the word rhythm is actually a word that they use in Japanese, but they would pronounce it as rizumu, which is similar to the McDonald's example that I gave earlier. So that's what the contestants are struggling with, is just trying to pronounce it how a native would, instead of how they would in their native language. But yeah, so we can take a look at how this next contestant does.
Rhythm.
Yeah. So that was definitely good pronunciation for sure. But yeah, so you can see that while Google Translate does have its flaws, it can be a good way to tell if you're pronouncing things in a way that would at least be intelligible to a native. Also, if for some reason, if you're really against Google Translate, you can also try using a website called DeepL, which usually gives pretty natural translations, even though they might be a little bit different from what you initially typed in. And also for Korean specifically, for some reason Google Translate isn't that great, so the main app a lot of people use is an app called Papago. But for languages like Japanese and Chinese, Google Translate has worked fine for me. And one final tip for learning pronunciation in this section is if you really want to challenge yourself, you can try practicing minimal pairs. Minimal pairs are just a set of words that are different by just one sound. So that way you can really practice pronouncing those sounds in a practical application. Because sometimes it's easier to pronounce a sound in isolation, but when you actually try to use it in a word, it becomes a lot harder. A good example in Korean might be masiseo, which means tasty, versus 멋있어, which means cool. Or in Japanese, it's not really a minimal pair, but it's a set of words that people often get confused, is the difference between kawaii, which means scary, and kawaii, which means cute. For example, you can try pronouncing these into the translator and see if you can get it to understand what you're saying. 맛있어.
It's delicious.
맛있어.
That's awesome.
怖い.
Scared.
かわいい.
Cute.
And this even works for the tones in Chinese. For example, these two sentences vary only by one set of tone changes, but you can try pronouncing it into Google Translate and it'll be able to pick up on the difference. 我想继续跟你联系.
I want to keep in touch with you.
我想继续跟你练习.
I want to continue practicing with you.
Yeah, and so you can see there, it can also pick up on differences of tone as well. So this can be especially useful in Chinese, where some words have the same pronunciation but different tones. Yeah, so that's one thing you can do to get some feedback on your pronunciation. And it's so simple, if you want, you can even pause this video and try it yourself. And also, I just wanted to say, don't worry if you weren't able to get it, because I think that it's particularly hard to get Google Translate to understand what you're saying if you don't give it any context. So generally in practical use, when you're doing pronunciation practice like this, you'll do it in the context of a sentence so that the translator has a better chance of understanding what you're saying. If you try using this technique and just feel like the translator isn't understanding what you're saying, don't worry, you're not alone. For Korean, for example, it took me maybe 3 to 6 months of me studying the language and practicing my pronunciation before I could consistently get it to understand what I was saying. And even if you use your native language trying to speak into the translator, sometimes it can still make mistakes. So don't worry if you can't get it every time, because even natives have a hard time with that. But if you can get it around the 80 to 90% mark, that's a really good place to be at. And if you feel like you're pronouncing things correctly, but it's still not understanding, it's possible it could be a sign that what you're trying to say is not grammatically correct. So what you can do is you can try to put the original sentence in your native language and see how it would translate it to your target language. If you don't know how to find out what minimal pairs exist, this would be a good application to ask ChatGPT about it. Just make sure to double check in the dictionary that the words it's teaching you are, really words. But yeah, after that, you can find some minimal pairs and practice them. And also just as a heads up, there won't always be perfect minimal pairs between every sound, but generally there are quite a lot, so hopefully it'll be enough to help you get the majority of your pronunciation down. One example I hear a lot from my foreign friends is they often have a hard time pronouncing the difference between snake and snack. So sometimes they'll tell me, oh, I'm eating some snakes. And I'm just like, huh? But this is why pronunciation is really important, because even if you just pronounce one sound incorrectly, the word can have a completely different meaning. And I mean, don't even get me started on Chinese. I don't think I need to explain that very much. But yeah, if you're learning Chinese, definitely spend some time looking at the tones. Alright, so moving on to arguably the most important step, talking with natives. I think this is really key to my method, and this step is extremely important for both pronunciation and in general as well. Because during your language exchange, you'll be working on your listening skills, speaking skills, grammar, and vocabulary knowledge all at the same time. I still think you need some introductory knowledge before jumping head on into language exchanges, but I really do recommend that you try to start talking with natives as soon as you can. Most people should be ready within the first 3 months of serious study, and as early as even 2 weeks in, depending on your personal situation and how much time you can put into language learning. But yeah, I really think that having the huge powerhouse of having consistent calls with natives will really be the most time efficient and enjoyable way to improve your languages. Because not only is it efficient in terms of improving your language skills, but at the same time as studying, you can also be meeting new people, making new friends, and learning more about the amazing culture of your target language, which is probably a big reason why many of you are learning languages in the first place. And when you can make new relationships through your target language, it can help motivate you and give so much more meaning to your language learning study. So yeah, I really advocate for having language exchanges if at all possible. But in terms of specifically improving pronunciation, I really think that language exchanges are also extremely effective because during conversations, you're really forced to pick apart natural speech in order to understand what your partner is saying. So this can serve as a really active and involved way of learning the pronunciation of your target language inside and out. And while I show a lot of clips in VRChat, I actually wouldn't recommend using VRChat for language exchanges, or at least not as a beginner, since a lot of people here are just trying to have regular conversations with their friends. So if you aren't already at a somewhat conversational level, it might be difficult to just join into a conversation. This is why I'd recommend that if you're new to speaking, to try to do language exchanges via language exchange apps or Discord servers. Because for example, if you wanted to learn Japanese, you could be connected with a Japanese person who wants to learn English. And I think the language exchange process will go a lot smoother this way, since you'll both be understanding of what it's like to learn a foreign language, and are both interested in each other's languages and cultures. So yeah, that's where I'd recommend starting off with language exchanges. In the future, I hope to make a video explaining how I approach language exchanges, and also alternatives out there for those who think that they're not quite ready yet. So if that's something you might be interested in, please consider subscribing so you don't miss that video when it comes out. In my previous guide, I didn't mention input very much, but I think that for learning pronunciation, I do think that listening to the language often can really help your brain understand how it's supposed to sound, and thus help your pronunciation in the long run. I think the benefits of input in terms of pronunciation will be effective for anyone at any level. I think as you gain more knowledge in the language and can understand more of what you're listening to, you'll find that input can also help you learn new grammar patterns and new words that you can research on your own. I should mention that there's another method out there which focuses on media consumption and input as your main way of learning a language. And I just want to clarify that that's different from what I'm talking about here, which is to specifically use input as a way to improve your understanding of pronunciation. But yeah, I do think that input like podcasts can definitely be a good way to still be efficiently learning while you're doing things like chores or exercising, etc. And even if you don't understand what they're saying, you're getting more exposure to how the language is supposed to sound. And watching shows in your target language can be a good way to end your day if you're feeling too tired to study actively. But if you just have a chunk of free time to do anything, things like language exchanges or studying grammar and vocabulary have been the most time-efficient ways to improve in my personal experience. But yeah, so throughout every part of learning a language, I tried to keep pronunciation in mind. I would do a lot of research on specific pronunciations whenever I encountered a character or sound that I struggled with, and I always tried to practice pronouncing words and phrases while doing my flashcard review. Whenever I'd listen to native input through podcasts or language exchanges, I tried to be very careful to listen to how they pronounce things. And I'd practice and get feedback on my pronunciation by using things like Google Translate as well as just talking to my language partners. And if you'd like to join my community, I have a Discord which you're welcome to join. And for our step-by-step guide on how I learn languages, check out this video here. Special thanks to Dielfons, XX Twilight, Bon, Leonardo P, Pau Pau Sierra, and all of my other amazing patrons who make videos like these possible. Thank you so much, and your support means the world to me.